Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Tours on Tap. I'm David Moore, Downtown Raleigh Alliance's Placemaking and Activations Manager. We're really happy to have you with us here tonight. Couple reminders, if you need to log off early, we'll be recording this, and so it'll be on our website tomorrow. So you can definitely come back to this tasting and enjoy it at a later time. Also keep in mind, Trophy is going to continue to sell the 4-pack until tomorrow night. So if you need to come back, go back and get some more beer, be sure and do that. Really excited for this next installment of our brewery tours. And I'm excited to be joined by Woody Lockwood, Chris Powers, and Les Stewart. To get this tour started, or let me take a moment back. What we're going to do today is we'll do a sneak peek inside Trophy's brewing facility, and you'll learn a little bit about how their brewing process works. Then we'll talk to Chris for a little bit about the history behind Trophy and how it got its start. And then we'll move towards the tasting. Throughout tonight, please ask questions using the Q&A feature. We want to hear from you. If you have questions about the beer or what would pair well with it, ask those questions and we'll get the answers from the experts. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and get started with our short video that shows you how the brewing process works for Trophy. Just give me one moment.
Found deep in the details of recipes or the new. At Trophy, we pride ourselves on brewing lots of different styles of beer, including using lots of techniques and ingredients that are unexplored or just now being conceived and implemented by the craft brewing community. And while the difference between good and great beer is often found deep in the details of recipes or the nuance of brewing techniques, there's some basics that I want to walk you through about beer making. First, let's start with basic ingredients of most beer: malted grain, hops, water, and yeast. Let's start with grain. The most common is barley, followed by wheats and oats. Most grain that we use is malted, which means that it has been allowed to germinate and then kilned to halt germination. The result is a seed full of potential enzymatic energy and food that will later nourish the yeast and turn beer into, well, beer. A hefty percentage of grain that we use at Trophy, in fact, is grown and malted right here in central North Carolina. On the brew day, we crush and mash the grain, extracting from the grain a syrupy, sugary liquid that we call wort, or unfermented beer. During boiling of the wort, we typically add hops, the likes of which we also have lots of options. Some varieties of hops will contribute fruit-like flavors, and others might impart pine or woody notes. Hops are traditionally added to the beer to prevent it from spoiling during the early stages of fermentation. But these days, we add them as much for character and flavor, thus our favorite refreshing pale ales and juicy IPAs. Once the boiling portion of the brew day is done, we cool the wort and move the liquid into a fermenter where we add yeast, closely monitor and control the temperature and the pressure of the tank, and wait for the yeast to ferment through all of the available sugars, producing primarily CO2 and alcohol. Not unlike grain and hops, we also these days have lots of yeast strains to choose from. Some are traditional strains with origins in specific brewing regions of the world. Others are new isolated strains, which are fun to experiment with while manipulating the fermentation environments. However, like most breweries, a majority of our beers are brewed with a similar collection of yeast varieties that we call our house strains. We know these strains well in terms of their capabilities and limitations, and as such, we use them to ensure our core brands are consistent in flavor and in quality. The fermentation process usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks, but could take much longer depending on the style of beer or the additions that we may make during the fermentation, like adding hops or fruit. After the beer has completed fermentation and passed our quality controls, it's sent to a conditioning tank from which it is packaged either into kegs, bottles, or cans. Now, like I said, that's how most beer is made. And yet we haven't talked about some of the really unique things that we do at Trophy to step outside of that box. For example, we age some of our higher alcohol beers in recently dumped bourbon barrels or other spirits in our conditioned barrel room at the Maywood location. These take additional flavors both from the wood and the barrel, and even are influenced by the spirit that was previously in the vessel. We also have a second, smaller system on which we try really outside the box ingredients and techniques. These beers are typically only available at our own tap rooms and restaurants. We also use wine barrels and huge fooders located at our Morgan Street location to produce sour beer, which is a whole subcategory of beer that relies on not just yeast, but also specifically cultivated strains of bacteria to sour age elegant beers that take months, if not years, to develop and are ultimately either bottle conditioned or, in some cases, canned on a canning line that we have recently installed exclusively to be used for sour beer. There are unlimited ways to make beer, and our team is constantly coming up with new techniques and ideas that continue to push the envelope in a way that we hope trophy beer will be known and celebrated for.
Well, awesome. I definitely learned a lot more about your process, and I'm eager to learn more during the tasting. But what we'll do next is go to Chris and just talk about how Trophy got its start.
Yeah, so Trophy as a brewery started in 2012. It was kind of an idea that we had when we first opened our first location, which was called the Busy Bee Cafe. We opened that in 2009. In 2009, the craft beer scene in Raleigh was a whole lot different than it is now. There was just a couple breweries downtown, and they were kind of in Raleigh actually, but they were just brewing some of the standard style beers, which are, tried and true. They would brew an amber, possibly a wheat beer, an IPA, and then a dark beer in the fall or winter. And what we were doing is we were traveling quite a bit, getting to know more about the beer industry and getting to know more about other breweries in other states and what they were doing. And we saw a real opportunity for us to kind of push the boundaries of what beer can be and what people in Raleigh could expect from a brewery. So what we wanted to do right off the bat was to start off brewing special styles of beer. And so in 2012, what we did is we kicked off with a really interesting draft list. Was something that was not the norms for North Carolina at the time. We started off with a Berliner Weiss, a Goza, some barrel-aged Doppelbock, some different styles of IPA, some things that were being brewed in larger cities in the Northeast and out West, and really an opportunity for us to put our mark on the craft brewing scene in the area. So we were traveling and seeing all these other breweries in other cities and states and seeing that what was possible, and we wanted to bring that back to our market here in Raleigh. So what we started off with in 2009, 2010 is we were doing a lot of collaborations with getting to know the other breweries in the area and trying to figure out what they liked about the size of their system, what they liked about some of their processes, and some of the lessons they've learned as they've made decisions of purchasing their products and the ingredients for their beer. And then in 2011, we really said, you know what? We are working on these collaborations with breweries across the state, all over the country, and doing a lot of the hard work where we would really just get an opportunity to get the beer back and not really be a part of the hands-on process of making beer. So in 2011, we decided to say, you know what, let's just do it. Let's do it ourselves. So we started over here on Morgan Street in a bail bondsman's closet. And that was where we started on a 3-barrel system. If you guys are familiar with that type of sizing, 3 barrels is 93 gallons of beer at a time. So that was really like a larger kind of quantity or production of homebrew system. We started off in a closet, and we were really worried about, we knew that we could make this great beer. We were worried about, are people going to get into it? Are people going to be excited about it? So we'll keep it kind of conservative. We'll start off with a small system, and if worst comes to worst, what we'll do is we'll sell it to our friends that work in the restaurant industry in the area, and heck, we'll drink more of it ourselves if we have to. We quickly realized that people in Raleigh were really getting excited about the styles of beers we were brewing. It really gave us an opportunity to experiment and really kind of earn people's trust with the styles of beer that we're brewing and the amount of education we were putting into our staff members and the excitement that our staff had for craft beer and, the comfort level of talking about craft beer and kind of sharing that with our guests. So 2012 is when we really hit the ground running here on Morgan Street. And we started off with just a bar, and our original occupancy here on Morgan Street was 14 seats.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a tiny spot. We had our friend Ed Crockett, who was a longtime friend of ours. He worked the door during the day. Les and one other, Les actually by himself for a few months would brew all of the beer. And then at night, or at about 3 p.m., 4 p.m., he would have to shrink all of his ingredients back into the brewery area. And then we would open for regular business.
Wow.
Yeah, we quickly realized that was not sustainable. Les's hair was quickly changing from one color to 2, 3, and more towards that grayish side. And
Gone.
so we realized that we needed to get him some help. So we enlisted the help of a home brewer who was really getting into it and expanding our team. And that is where we started to really think about where Trophy was going to grow. We added a couple fermenters in that location, added a patio, added dining, not in that order. We added dining first, and then we added a patio out in front, and quickly realized we're kind of busting at the seams. We were no longer, it wasn't a great option to, work so hard during the day and then have to shrink back and so service could come in and get started for the day and really take over the brewing space. So we started looking outside our doors and trying to find a location that was really going to be focused on the manufacture of beer. And that's where we found our Maywood location. Maywood Avenue, if you guys are familiar, is just outside on the southeast side or southwest side of town. And we saw it as a lot of opportunity, very close to downtown, close proximity to the farmer's market, because we love to use North Carolina ingredients in every way that we possibly can in our beer. And it's a quick jump down to downtown to our other locations. So we decided to go ahead and plant our flag on Maywood Avenue and really start to grow what we could do over there. We started with a 20-barrel brew house. For us, we thought that was insane. We would actually get close to it and see it and get up close. We could barely fathom how much beer we were going to be able to be making on that location. And it took us a little while to kind of wrap our heads around that and kind of think about Trophy, instead of being a small little brewery that we just sold our beer on site, to thinking about what we can do on a larger scale, what it would take to kind of take that experimental spirit that we started with on Morgan Street, translate it to the larger scale system with consistency and still the fun that we really enjoy about making beer every day.
Awesome. Thank you for that background on the business. I was doing a little research and I found a fun fact about the beer handles or the tap handles that you guys use. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I thought that was really fun and interesting.
Sure. Woody, you want to tackle that?
Yeah. Back when Chris and I, first started dreaming of a location, even before we had met Les and we had dreamed of a brewery, we always loved a location over on Davie Street that was a trophy shop called Morton's. We, in our heads, over the course of many beers, over many nights, we kind of made an image in our heads of who Mort probably was, that he must be a guy that's ready to almost retire, and maybe we can get in there and get that space. And just the idea, we started kicking around that idea, I think, of the names that could come with the name Trophy. We thought the names would be endless, and they lasted about 3 or 4 weeks, maybe. I think
No, longer than that. It was like 2 years.
So, yeah, I mean, the idea of that space that we loved that didn't end up working out sort of translated into the tap handles, into the brand image for us, and it came really easily for us. And fun fact, our Pilsner now that's named Mort's Trophy Lager is now named after that trophy shop, and we actually get all of the parts for our tap handles at that trophy shop. He's moved on to Garner, just south of our Maywood Avenue location, but whenever we need parts for more tap handles to hand out to places that we distribute to, we head over to his shop and buy those pieces.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty neat because he is always excited to try we typically will bring him some beers. And he was thrilled when we named our new lager Mort's. I think he actually teared up. So.
A great story. But yeah, for those who may not know the full story, at one point in time, you could actually take an old Trophy in to Trophy and they would, in exchange, give you a tasting of a beer. And I thought that was just really cool and a fun way to get rid of your, trophies that may just be hanging out and don't mean anything else. But in terms of inviting the community in to leave a piece of themselves is really cool. And, something that a lot more businesses could try. And so I just thought that was really interesting, fun fact.
Yeah.
But yeah. So thank you for that overview of the business. One question I had is, at this time, how many locations does Trophy Brewing have?
So currently we have 3 locations that are named Trophy Brewing, related to us, that are just Trophy locations. And then we also have our bottle shop on Hillsborough Street, which we call the State of Beer, where we jokingly say we don't have every beer in the world, we just have our favorite beer in the world. And it's our opportunity for us to have our friends from all over the country send us beer, and we get to sell it in our shop and kind of tell their stories on our turn. It's a great location because we do natural wine, we do really great small producer beers, and a good place to grab a sandwich just to go. And we also do have quite a few Trophy beers there too.
And you bring up community, and I'd just like to, highlight something Chris kind of mentioned there, which is, that location and the ability to let us bring in other beers, other breweries, engage them in a way that, where we're facilitating, their business and those kind of things. We've actually originated a lot of great relationships with other breweries, which is, the brewing community is really, I think, a really unique thing in the greater kind of, of all the businesses that you could go into, right? Like, we have this kind of wonderful, collaborative, competitive environment where we sort of help each other. And State of Beer is sort of our ace up our sleeves in terms of how we can really engage that community in a way that's really brought us very close to a lot of breweries across the country.
Yeah, it's such a great place for our friends. When we go out and we travel, we do collaborations all over the country, and I'll talk to them and tell them how awesome Raleigh is and why, people are like, Raleigh, North Carolina, tell us about that, or, want to know more about what makes Raleigh special. And then we get to show them. So what we do is we typically will invite them back to come brew a beer with us at Trophy. And then what we'll do that evening is we'll host a tap takeover at State of Beer. That's one of the things that we love the most, is get to introduce our breweries who are like, doing as exciting beers as we are, and doing really cool special beers in different processes, and really doing some of the cutting edge things in the industry. We get to show them Raleigh. So they come to Raleigh and we take them to see all of our favorite spots. We'll show them to our favorite dive bar. We'll take them to specific places that are special to us so that they can start to form their connection to Raleigh too. Part of it is, good for their business because they send beer to North Carolina, because North Carolina is a great beer state. People love craft beer here, and they get to know that, North Carolina is a place that should be on their radar. And Raleigh, we like to say, is, the spot to start.
For sure. And speaking of like your travels and, going to these other breweries across the country, real quick, can you just name a brewery that you just loved outside of the state of North Carolina?
But I'll go first.
A couple also.
Sure. One of our favorites, my personal favorites, people to work with and people that I really respect, is a brewery in Denver called Our Mutual Friend. They are very like-minded to like the kind of experimental nature that we follow in our beer, their partnership in the community, and really wanting to become a community hub like we do here at Trophy. Plus, they're fun guys just to hang out with. They share a lot of our same personality traits and really sense of humor.
Gotcha. What about you, Les? What's a favorite beer outside the state of North Carolina? We'll come back to this question later for beers within North Carolina, but I wanted to ask, outside of the state, what do you love?
So it was actually a relationship that started when we were very, very young as a brewery, and we began a relationship with Night Shift Brewing in Everett, Massachusetts. And at the time, they were a much smaller brewery than they are today. But we've continued a really great relationship with them, learned a lot about how to grow responsibly and efficiently, everything from how to manage a small brewing team to the right equipment to buy, and it's been a relationship that, we've shared information back and forth, and just, it's something that I certainly cherish.
Awesome.
And they make incredible beer.
Woody, what about you?
Mine would have to be Allagash up in Maine. First, because they don't put out a bad beer ever. Almost every single thing they do is great. And secondly, because they have some really great initiatives to support local agriculture. They commit to local farms, to buy, tons and tons of grain, and they really support and stand behind that. They don't just talk about it, they actually do it. So they always impress me.
That's awesome. Speaking of working with local farms, I won't ask the specific names, but do you work with more than one farm for the grain and the other supplies you need to create the beer?
I'll speak to a little bit about the adjuncts and some of the things that that I really handle is like locating fruits or sourcing fruits. We buy a ton of fruit this year, every year. We try to get it from as close to the brewery as possible. Yeah, so far we've taken about, I got 800 pounds of blueberries. We had 400 pounds of peaches. Let's see, that's so far this year. And that's just for the batches of beer that we're currently using. Les, you want to talk about the grain?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned in the video, we do have a lot of the grain that we have on site is actually from North Carolina and malted here. But also we rely on a lot of grain from really around the globe. Some beers you really are looking for a very specific flavor that traditionally comes from a Pilsen malt that's grown in Germany, or a two-row barley that's grown in England. We use some oats that are grown in Canada, for example. But yeah, we really pull from a range of different places. Other ingredients, hops also come from across the globe. It is difficult to grow hops in North Carolina, so we do rely on your very kind of specific hop growing regions for the majority of our hops, including the Northwest United States, the Bavarian region of Germany, and even Australia and New Zealand, to name three of the hottest hop spots in the world right now.
Awesome.
It should also be pointed out that in that video, that wasn't just a generic shot of a wheat field. That was actually a farm that we got to go visit 2 or 3 weeks ago. Perry Farms up in Rollsville, right next to Wake Forest out there. That was actually our drone taking that shot, and we got a really awesome tour. So we get a lot of barley and wheat from that farm.
Yeah,
awesome.
I think for us it's so important to use as much local agriculture as possible, because when we kind of approach brewing beer, we always think about how do we capture the flavor of the place where it's brewed, the people that are making it, and the time that it's being made. And we take that into account every time we're approaching like a fruit addition to a beer, or we try to do seasonality, where it makes sense. Like we grab strawberries at the peak of season, we grab peaches at the peak of season. We do cling, and we also do freestone peaches. We do blueberries, and then we'll do blackberries, and then things towards the fall where we get persimmon and we get some other really exciting fruit and like kind of the end of the season. So we're kind of following that trend of the season.
Awesome. Well, you guys ready to get this tasting going?
Sure.
Awesome. I'm gonna let you take it away and get started with the first beer.
Let's see what we've got here. So if everyone breaks open their 4-pack, I think we're going to start here with Trophy Husband. Trophy Husband, the counterpart to Trophy Wife and Trophy Partner, of course. This is currently is our Belgian wit beer. It really relies, a lot of its flavor comes from the addition of coriander, though we do add a couple of other spices as well. But I'm going to go ahead and pour this thing, and we're going to talk about it a little bit.
Real quick, Les, can you talk about why it's important to pour a beer a certain way?
Sure. So different beers actually should be poured a little bit differently depending on the style of beer. But typically you're trying to pour a beer so that you don't, well, depends, right? So there are some beers that may have sediment in the bottom of them intentionally that you may or may not want to avoid. Typically with wit beers, you'll take them and swirl them around a little bit because they'll have a bit more protein in them than other beers. That's important because what you want to achieve is a bit more of a haze, as you can see with this beer. You want to really kind of let up let that protein from the wheat up and into the beer, because that's part of the flavor and the mouthfeel and everything that you should expect from that beer. With beers that are built to have dense heads or dense foam, like pilsners or some of the kind of modern lagers, you really want to build the head such that it holds density. And then a proper inside of one of those styles that's really supposed to have those dense heads, you'll see the lacing actually show up on the glass as you drink the beer. This is a good way to indicate that you've poured the beer right. The benefit of creating that dense foam head is it really holds on to a lot of the carbonation the way that you want to, such that the first sip is as good as the last sip. And you get the awesome foam mustache, which is essential. So so then there's glassware also. Different glassware is built for different types of beer. Some really prefer a nice rounded bottom so you don't lose too much carbonation as you go into it. Some you're supposed to hit the bottom a little bit harder so that you break out some of that carbonation and create that brightness as well. There's a lot of good literature on what the proper glassware is for different styles. I think Beer Advocate has some of that information. It's really easy to find on with a quick Google search. But yeah, I like depending on the beer, you have different glasses that benefit different beers. This is known as an IPA glass. It was developed by Dogfish Head, I think, and in combination with Spiegel, I believe. Is that right, Chris?
Spiegelau.
And the idea is you get these ridges in the bottom and an etched kind of element on the bottom that allows continuous release of CO2, such that it adds to the foam the whole time you're drinking it. So yeah, different glassware for different types of beer. We use what he was talking about, our Mort's style of beer. This is our Mort's glass. It is kind of ideal for a Pilsner. It's not too big around, so you can appreciate the clarity that you should expect with a Pilsner. And it allows you to build dense head. Has a very shallow taper to it as it approaches the top. And if you like your Pilsners cold, like I do, you can grab onto just the stem so that you're not accidentally warming up the glass as you're drinking. Now that's notably different than like big Belgian dark beers or imperial stouts that you actually want to warm up a little bit so you can get the full flavor from those malts. So those are actually, oftentimes don't have stems, or otherwise you're expected to hold like a brandy sniffer to use the warmth of your hand to kind of agitate that beer into the right temperature and present it as the brewer intended.
Thanks for that info.
Hey, David, let me jump in here real quick. When we are going to taste a beer, we kind of break it down into 4 easy steps, right? So everybody has your glass. Typically what we like to do is we grab the beer, you hold it up to the light, because that's going to give you an impression of the beer that you're about to take in. So you can learn a lot about a beer by just looking at it. You can look at it and see, like this particular beer has it's going to have a lighter body. There's not going to be those dark chocolate roasted malts that are going to add to flavors of chocolate and coconut, or chocolate and sometimes like coffee and things like that. So that's step 1. You want to look at it. Step 2, you want to give it a swirl. What you're going to do there, you're going to start to release any sort of carbonation, and you're going to get a lot of those flavor or a lot of those aromas that are coming out of the beer. You're going to smell any sort of spice additions. You're going to start to smell the yeast characteristic. So you're swirling it. And then number 3, you want to put your nose in it. And we do this thing, it's called a hound dog sniff. You do it a couple times, it's less uncomfortable. You do it, everybody's doing it. It's totally fine. So you put your nose in there, and what you want to do is take 2 to 3 quick sniffs. When you're doing that, you're getting the full impression of the beer through your olfactory. So you're really starting to smell what this beer is going to be like. And for me, I start to salivate a little bit, which is a good thing because I'm getting excited about the beer that's going to be tasted in a second. And then 4th, what you do, you want to taste the beer. So you take the beer, pour it in your mouth, and what you want to do is let it roll around. You want to go around your tongue, around your teeth, all the way throughout your mouth because you really want to get the impression of the beer. Like Les talked about carbonation, he talked about temperature, and all those things. You're really getting the impression of what the brewer intended in that glass. You guys want to do this together? Take a sip together?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's do it. Cheers.
So you can kind of get the orangey kind of flavors that are coming through this. We actually add bitter orange peel, actually some amount of sweet orange peel as well, to the very end of the boil that pulls out some of those citrus notes that you may be picking up. The coriander certainly doesn't hide. We also use seeds of paradise to kind of support that kind of rounded aromatic flavor or aromatic element that you should expect from a wit beer. A bit of kind of what a wit beer is. A wit beer is originally a German style of beer. Wit being white, you should expect to have a lighter, hazy, almost white characteristic to it. That is from the white wheat that is added to it in high percentage compared to other beers. Typically, it's also fermented with a yeast that throws a lot of recognizable esters and phenols that can be associated with wit beer and some of those German beers. Incidentally, kind of a fun. I won't tell you what strain we use, but I'll say that it's not a traditional wit strain that we use for our wit beer. So just one of the kind of different things that we pull at Trophy.
So with this beer, you said it had some elements of citrus, right?
Yeah, it has orange peel actually added to it during the boiling process. So that's mostly where you're getting the citrus. Now, it should be said, as I mentioned in the video, sometimes you get citrus from beer and it isn't from orange peel at all. It can be from hops, or it can be it can be from the yeast even. With certain yeast that will throw fruity flavors at different fermentation temperatures. But yeah, this one actually has actual citrus in it, which is actually uncommon.
Cool. While we're on the subject of different ingredients, what's one of the craziest ingredients you guys use to create a beer?
Peanut butter.
Peanut butter? Squid ink?
Squid ink.
What beer was that? Is that still around?
That was one of the small batch system beers. So as you know, we have this original system that we started on that was originally located over here on Morgan Street, which is a 3-barrel system. And that's kind of how we take all the crazy ideas out there and we try to put it together on this small system, because when it works out, it's great. And sometimes it doesn't work out and we only have 93 gallons of it. But every time we brew a beer like that, we learn something. I can't remember the name of that beer. Oh, it was like it was like Kraken.
It was another sea monster thing.
It was named after a mythical sea creature.
Yeah, it was a giant squid type thing.
As you can tell, it made an impression on all of us. So,
thankfully, it's long gone.
Yeah.
So actually, you bring up. So actually, I'm going to parlay this into one of the questions that's out there. There was a question of what's the most challenging type of beer to brew, and the answer to that question is the type of beer that you haven't ever brewed before. And that's true for ingredients that you've never used before also, including squid ink, which what we didn't realize is it actually has a tendency to precipitate out. So when we first added it, it was awesome. It turned the beer straight up black. Like it was we're like, this is really interesting. Kind of has a little salty kind of element to it. But we had built it on top of a style that made sense for. So it was really good. A couple of days later, we went back to it as we were kind of preparing to package it. And damn it, the squid ink hadn't precipitated all out to the bottom, and the beer was basically kind of yellow, kind of like a grayish yellow color. We were like, oh no, but who would have known that squid ink precipitates at higher pressures and lower temperatures? Now you know. So,
lesson learned.
Well, thank you for that. I was not expecting squid ink.
Yeah.
There's some weird ones. I mean, we've done a lot. We've done juniper berries. We've used some things that have been inspired by other
by cocktails. So
Oh, we actually are really working on a really, really cool project right now. David, I mentioned that we always try to develop a flavor of location, like our place. So we started a project with the help of our friend Matt Halliburton, who's a potter.
Mm.
We had him throw amphoras for us. If you guys are not familiar, an amphora is a large clay fermentation vessel. Because what we were trying to do is recreate the flavor of North Carolina in any aspect that we can possibly add to the beer. So he found North Carolina clay that was actually mined from the Catawba. We used all North Carolina ingredients in the beer, and then we actually collected yeast from our location over on Maywood Avenue. So we're gonna have a native yeast, all these different ingredients that are grown in North Carolina, and then it's gonna be conditioned and fermented actually in a clay vessel, which is indicative of the soil in North Carolina. So we're really excited about that, yeah.
Can't wait to try that one.
That's kind of opting into the unknown for us because it's a totally new project, but it's a lot opportunity for us to learn a lot.
So we just had a question come in. Do you all ever brew beers with pairing with specific food in mind? Does Woody or Les want to take that one maybe?
Go for it, Les.
sure. Yes, we have done that. But part of the So one way that we did that at one point in time, there was a specific event that was coming up, and we were paired with we're actually paired with Ashley Christensen, who decided to smoke a pig, and the idea was we were going to brew a Doppelbock. And the idea was a Doppelbock, kind of the sweeter kind of elements of the Doppelbock were going to be worked into the salsas and everything that we ended up using to cook the pig with on the night before the event. So, and we actually cooked the pig with the beer as well. So then the idea was the next day you came and you had the little barbecue sandwich, and you had the beer, and it was meant to be enjoyed together. That's just one example of one time that we've done this. I'm trying. I tell you what, we have done so many doggone beers.
We've brewed some beers like our Rosemary Goza that just really pairs well with lots of different foods. It's not a beer you necessarily want to drink 3 of by itself, but with food, it's amazing. And I think that sort of leads into one of the most fun things we do is collaboration dinners with restaurants, like Les was saying, and being that we have the small system with all the exciting, small batch things and the big system, we always have such a wide variety of things. So that's one of the most fun things we do is we get to work with chefs and dream up, both menus together. So they talk about some things that they might want to try. We talk about some things that we have available and some special things that we squirreled a case away and we want to bring it out for this special event. So that's a really fun thing for us. But specifically, we don't necessarily say this beer is for, steak or,
Yeah, more often than not, it's the beer, it's food that's being built to match the beer. So what we'll do is we'll meet, like to Woody's point, we'll meet with a chef and we'll kind of walk them through what we know about the beer and then open the door to what flavors it might pair with. And then they take it from there. And it's so much fun to watch, little fireworks go off in their brain about what they can do to kind of build a dish around the beer. So.
Awesome. Thank you for answering those questions. Are we ready to move on to the next beer?
Sure, let's do it. Next up, we're going to do the Cloud Surfer. So, this is our second most popular beer. It represents about 18% of our total production. So, which is noteworthy because our second most popular only represents 18% of our production. That's not if you were talking about most breweries that are our size or bigger, their second beer would be a much higher percentage. So we do a lot of different stuff, but that's still significant. And this is a fun IPA for us. We developed this about 3 years ago, guys, 4 years ago? Gosh.
Probably
3.5 years ago. Yeah. This is an IPA that relies on both Citra and Mosaic hops. It was noteworthy at the time because a lot of brewers at that point in time, again, 3.5 years ago, weren't doing what we refer to now as double dry hopping. So we're actually adding not just hops in the boil and not just hops during fermentation, which is a single dry hopping, but we're adding it at 2 different points of dry hop, at 2 different points of fermentation, because brewers were beginning to realize that at different temperatures and at different phases of fermentation, the hops would interact with the other ingredients in different ways to extract kind of different elements, or use different, or bond differently with the hop oils that we were introducing. So this was certainly a kind of cutting edge beer at the time. It's a little bit more common these days to see a double dry hopped or even a triple dry hopped beer. But this continues to be a really great beer for us, and definitely a refreshing beer to go back to all the time. It's a good daily drinker, 6.1%. It's the beer. So we're gonna do what, Chris? You want to lead us through a tasting of this guy?
Sure. So take the beer, hold it up in your hands, and you're going to notice some of those characteristics that Les just mentioned first. So you're going to see a little bit more of a residual haze to it, a little bit more of proteins that are kind of hanging out in this beer. The cool thing about those proteins hanging out in the beer is that those hop oils that Les was talking about being added during this, first and second dry hop additions, are going to adhere to those proteins. So you're going to get a bigger impression of what those hops are meant to smell like. So you hold it up, take a look at the light. You can see it's got a nice opacity?
Yeah, let's go with that.
And then, so you also notice that it's lighter malts. So there's not a ton of kilning that's happening to this beer, or actually roasting that's happening to the grain. And it's going to be a lighter bodied beer. So the next thing you want to do is you want to swirl it. Be careful. I got kind of a high fill here. So give it a swirl. You're releasing all those phenols. You're releasing some of those hop oils. You're getting those things brought to the surface. So it's going to give you the real impression of the beer. Next thing, throw your nose in there. The first thing you're going to smell is the last addition of hops that were added to this beer. So to me, this smells like tropical fruit. I get a little bit of grapefruit characteristic to it, but I also get pineapple and passion fruit. Some of those notes on the nose. And that's really where the tasting process starts, is when you're smelling a beer, because so much of your taste is related to aroma. And then my favorite part is give it a sip.
Cheers to that.
Cheers.
So we had a question come in. How do you know which beer has extra sediment and needs to be swirled before pouring?
So traditionally, it's German wheat beers, Weissens, wit beers. These are the ones that will come with the kind of conscious recommendation of swirling them or agitating them slightly before pouring them. Beyond that particular range of beers, and correct me if I'm wrong about thinking about this, guys, I would typically avoid agitating the beer too much. With IPAs, even hazy IPAs, the haze should stay in solution even if you don't agitate it. But there are some beers that you specifically shouldn't agitate. For example, bottle-conditioned beers. Now, I say this because bottle-conditioned beers have additional yeast that is added to them right before they're bottled. And all the carbonation that happens in that bottle happens because it's in a closed environment, and that yeast is eating through a little bit of sugar that's added to it. And so that there's a bit of yeast that's collected in the bottom of the bottle, or otherwise in the side of the bottle if it's kept on its side. And if that's the case, so we're talking about sour beer, oud Brewings, things like that may do this, so old world beers. So with those, I would gently not agitate and pour those off. But, most of your American beers, IPAs, pale ales, things like that, you really shouldn't have to think about it too much. You guys want to add anything to that?
Some breweries now with hazy IPAs are suggesting that you tilt it upside down before you gently, because they're not confident it stayed in suspension. And sometimes it is fun with, say, a Belgian lambic. Usually, if I'm drinking one of those, I'll be careful not to get any of that sediment into the first few pours. But then at the very end, sometimes it's fun to swirl it around and see what flavors that yeast and sediment on the bottom adds. It's not going to hurt you, certainly, but it's not always the most desirable thing throughout.
Yeah.
Awesome. So while we're still on the subject of Cloud Surfer, we have a question from the chat. When you all tasted Cloud Surfer for the first time, did you look at each other and realize how good it was, or did you have to go back and tweak it some more from the first time you tasted it?
I cried first time
We did know this was pretty good one from pretty early on, and there wasn't that much change to this particular beer. That's not true of all the stuff of even, Trophy Wife. There's a different story. But I'm trying to remember. Woody, you have way better memory than me. What did we change it too much, or did we feel like it was pretty good to go from the start?
We haven't changed Surfer too much. I think over the years, the most important thing has been our hop selection, making sure we find the best Citra and the best Mosaic for that beer that we possibly can. And that's a big challenge.
Yeah.
So let me jump off that. That's a really kind of fun thing to talk about that I don't think a lot of folks even know about. So you can imagine that let's talk about Cloud Surfer specifically. So you've got Citra and Mosaic hops. Both of these are varietals that are grown primarily, if not exclusively, in the the Northwest, if not in the Willamette region of kind of the Oregon, Washington region of the hop growing kind of world up there. And here's the other thing: even from lot to lot, like just a few miles away, you get a lot of change in kind of microclimates, a lot of different microclimates in that area. You can have a very different tasting, a very different hop just with a small change. Mm-hmm. And that's true also when it's harvested. So it needs to come from like the same harvest time and the same lot if you like really want to nail consistency in a beer. Now we're talking about a core beer that we're going to come back to all the time. So one of the most important things to us was get to a size where we could go up there and work with the hop farmers and say, okay, this is the lot that we want, and we want all of next year's Mosaic to come from that field that was harvested at that time. And that's one of the ways that we're able to maintain a consistent flavor and a kind of prime flavor with that beer. Otherwise, you're relying on trying to buy spot hops and trying to buy hops off the market that might be from this lot or might be from that lot. And, if they're the same variety, they generally have the same flavor. But if you really want to dial it in, you really have to work with the farmers to nail exactly when and where that hop came from. So we do that trip every year.
Yeah.
Now,
it's also interesting, to note that, if you were to go to a particular lot in the Yakima Valley one year, and you're going to start to taste how things change. We're talking about effects like Les mentioned, like climate change. There's a particular hop that we used to really like that's really started to take on some strange allium kind of qualities to it, like an onion kind of note to it, which when we first started tasting those hops, like Sriracha 8 is the hop that I'm thinking of, where certain regions started to develop these flavors of more onion than lemon and honey and some of those notes, which is wild to think about. And we're also, needs to be noted that we are forecasting our use. So we're thinking about hops, not this year. We're buying hops for 2, 3, 4 years in advance. And we're working with these relationships to say that, hey, listen, in 5 years, we think this beer is going to be super popular. We're going to need a ton of Mosaic to do this beer when it's super popular. Can we, put a deposit down on hops for 2026? Things like that. It's crazy kind of forecast market, but.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that. To the folks asking questions, we're going to come back to that, but I'd like to go ahead and keep moving on to the next beer, if that's okay.
That's good.
All right, so this next beer is fun to kind of put beside. So if you've got multiple glasses, or if you're just drinking from the can, that's fine. Hold on to that last one, because the next one is a variation of Cloud Surfer. This is called Aloha Surfer. This is basically Cloud Surfer with some conscious modifications of the hop additions later. But then we add a bunch of pineapple and passion fruit to. I'm trying to remember exactly what the pounds per barrel are, but it's significant. It's something like 2 pounds per gallon of pineapple and passion fruit puree added to this beer while it's fermenting, such that it ferments through the sugars that come from the yeast and leaves this kind of really nice combination of fruit that's sitting on top of those tropical notes that are still derived from that Citra and Mosaic combination that we talked about a few minutes ago. So let's crack this guy out.
One thing important to note about the order that we chose to drink these beers in, we start off with a lower ABV typically, and things that are going to be subtler flavors, like smaller additions of fruits and spices. So that's why we decided to start with Trophy Husband. That way you're less likely to lose out any subtle nuances, any subtleties to like the grain bill or hop characteristics or things like that. And as you are tasting these beers, you're kind of probably picking up on the fact that they are getting bold. They are getting bigger in ABVs. And when you drink them in this order, you can really pick up the differences in these beers.
Gotcha. Hey, Chris, while we're on the subject of ABV, someone asked that they noticed that the 4 beers in this pack have different alcohol percentages. How do you determine that, and why are they different?
Les, you want to tackle that one?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, most notably, the difference between Aloha Surfer and Cloud Surfer. I'm going to use this as an example because it will show you kind of what's going on there. I mentioned that we add a bunch of fruits during fermentation and then allow the fruit to ferment out. Effectively, what we're doing there is we're adding additional sugar to the beer. The result of which, as the yeast eats through that sugar, it adds more alcohol to the beer. So again, back to the video that we watched at the beginning, when you're mashing the grain, you're converting the carbohydrates into simple sugars, and then you're extracting a sugary liquid that you're putting in the fermenter. And the more sugar that's in that liquid, the higher density that liquid is with sugar content, the more potential alcohol that beer has to produce. So the yeast then begin to eat through that, and the result is a high alcohol beer, a beer that you can't drink 2 or 3 or 7 of.
Yeah. And just so when as a consumer, when you're tasting beers and you taste the beer that's going to be a little bit sweeter, a lot of times that's what your palate is really tasting is the alcohol level being higher. Yeah, which is desirable in a lot of styles of beer. I typically reserve those for the last beer, but that's just a personal preference.
Yeah, I mean, actually, back to what Chris was talking about in terms of ordering your beers, in that sequence to take advantage of, the nuanced flavors and making sure that you're not missing anything like that. Yeah, the same thing can be said for the alcohol level. But how you determine that? Okay, so I think there were kind of 2 parts of that question. How you determine how much alcohol is in it. What we're doing is we're tracking the amount of density that is removed from the liquid as it ferments. And that correlates with the amount of sugar that's being eaten up and turned into alcohol. So basically your liquid is becoming less dense as it approaches terminal fermentation. And the difference between how much sugar was in there in the beginning and how much sugar is in there in the end is how you determine exactly how much alcohol is in that beer.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you for answering that.
Yeah. One of you guys want to lead us through smelling and tasting this guy? Oh, I love to smell this beer.
Yeah, for sure. As you can see, do you want to do it, or what do you want me to do it, or?
Go for it.
Right. So you hold this beer up and you actually can compare it to the other Cloud Surfer. You can see that there is a difference in color. And that a lot of that color is coming from the fruit addition that Les was talking about. So there's 2 pounds of passion fruit and 2 pounds of pineapple per barrel of beer. So that is a substantial amount of fruit flavors that are being jammed into this beer. And this beer is actually, all those fruit flavors are actually supposed to highlight the hop characteristics, which typically when you talk about hops in relation to flavor, it does bring a little bit of for aromas, it's a lot of tropical fruit notes, but on the palate, it does have a little bit of bitterness to it, which for me is desirable, and especially in a beer like this. It doesn't let your palate get fatigued by the sweetness of a beer, and it doesn't allow it to get kind of boring. So you hold it up, you see it's got kind of an orange characteristic to it, a little bit darker in color. The base beer is Cloud Surfer, and then it's going to remind you of that in that color in that palate. So you give it a swirl, you're releasing all those fruit notes, you're going to fruit aromas and some of the hop oil. And then 3, you're putting your nose in there. And for me, I get like tropical fruit salad. I get a little bit of this like sweet part of a juicy, ripe fruit. You put your nose in there and it really just kind of jumps out of the glass. And to me, it's like sweet like dessert on the nose. Not over the top cloying, but to me, it's like fresh fruit salad. And then my favorite part, let it taste it. Really delicious.
Yeah, you notice that little tartness that kind of Chris was talking about, little bitterness like that. That's the passion fruit to me. Like it's like the passion fruit is the tartness. There's a little bit of a sweeter fruit underneath and a little bit more acidic. That's the pineapple, and that's all kind of sitting on top of that base.
So this beer was actually brewed to celebrate Cloud Surfer Day, which was our annual event where we would actually put together an entire list of varieties of Cloud Surfer. We call them variants of Cloud Surfer. So they're either beers that are based on the Cloud Surfer recipe that have weird or strange tweaks to it, or they're beers that are actually Cloud Surfer that we go ahead and adjuncts to it. We've done versions of Cloud Surfer, which would be like a triple version of Cloud Surfer, where we take that recipe for Cloud Surfer and we triple all of the ingredients. So it's a higher ABV beer. It still has a lot of that light kind of malt color. And then it has a huge amount of hop aroma. It's got a huge citrus punch on the nose. And when you drink it, it is the kind of beer that coats your palate, coats your teeth. And it's one of those beers that are very, very hip right now. We also do like a Belgian version of this beer. So we'll take Cloud Surfer and then we'll add some of those characteristics of Belgian beer. So it'll be Grains of Paradise, a citrus zest addition to it. Something where it kind of sets off those notes and also marries that with the Cloud Surfer flavor.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that. One question we got from the beer couple is, how do you all decide on the name of the different beers? I think you guys are really creative at that. And so we'd love to hear about, where do you come up with the inspiration for the names?
Woody, you want to handle that?
Woody.
He'll be the most...
This is a never-ending challenge for us. We have so many beers coming out all the time. It's sort of the blessing and the curse that we love doing new things all the time. We don't like, just staying stuck on the same beers. So with our small system, almost every single thing coming out of there is new, something we've never brewed before. And even on the big system, a large percentage of the batches we do there are things we've never done before. So it's sort of a committee, group text at times, a Basecamp project at times. We do everything we can to sort of rouse creativity out of our team of managers, our team of brewers throughout the company to provide ideas for this. A lot of the times it's come right down to the wire when our managers are saying, hey, the beer's going on tap right now. What do you want to name it? When it comes to packaging, we need names, we need label designs, we need to get these things printed before we're canning them or bottling them. So we're known to get down to the wire pretty often, but yeah, it's a committee of trophy staff that's always contributing to that.
Awesome.
Sometimes, like what he's saying, like sometimes it's a short conversation. We actually used to have a text thread with all the people that were kind of had interest in the naming of these beers. And people would constantly be asking to be removed from the thread because you got to go through terrible names to get to some good names. We've even
all of a sudden you look down and you've got like 70 texts and you're like, what is going on right now?
Conversations going around. Sometimes we're guided by current events. We had a beer last fall called Flava Burn, which was a funny beer for us. We also now we brewed a beer called Trophy Partner, which was to celebrate Pride Month. Sometimes we even let the artwork that we do the series of labels called an artist series, and we let the art kind of guide the naming thread. We worked with an artist from New York. His name is Young Salute. He's part of a program there that's getting to support young artists as they're kind of, finding their career in their way. So we looked at his designs and kind of came up with names based on the artwork. We're developing a new artist series as we speak with a local artist, Natasha Walker. And this one has a different message, and it's kind of a way for us to interact with the community and people kind of to support those brands.
Awesome. Speaking of interacting with the community, someone asked, can they still give trophies?
Yes, we always take trophies. Please.
There you have it. And then another quick question, which I thought was great. Based off of the one-off beers that you've done, do you have any that you would like to bring back or make permanent, or anything that's in the works that you could tell us about that?
I think it's awesome. We all have like favorite beers that we've brewed in the past, and they always kind of like sort of peak to the surface of like becoming a possibility again. I was stopped in the parking lot at Harris Teeter one time where someone had been to Trophy before, and she was like, hey, you guys made this really good. She knew the name, and she's like, it was cherry smoked goza. Like, looked at me like I was a crazy person. I was like, damn, I remember that beer, but I can't remember the name. And like, it was crazy that her connection to that beer was so strong. And she was like, please brew that beer again. I had to go to the car and look up Untapped and like try to find this beer, which is a really cool thing that people are so connected to it. My personal favorite beer, we did a tequila barrel-aged IPA, which was smoked IPA, which is not necessarily trending or cool right now, but it's a beer that I'm personally attached to. So
that sounds good. I would want to try that again if you ever want to bring that back.
Yeah, we're suckers for pressure though. So if you hit us up on social media, we'll definitely bring it to the brewers meeting and consider rebrewing things.
Yeah, for sure.
You heard that here, everyone. So keep that in mind.
See Les's head explode right there.
Of course. We want you to keep all the hair that you already have. So don't stress us out too much.
Yeah, I mean, some beers it's real easy with. Other beers, it's like, how long it took us to process that fruit and how many man hours we had to put into that. Like, what we charged for that beer did not make up for it. But, labor of love. So.
Cool. All right, are we ready to move on to the last beer?
Oh, we can certainly do that. Last beer is another. Well, this is a throwback. So this was a beer that we for a long time did more regularly. And what we're finding now is that it's a lot of fun to revisit this beer every few months or so. It is Double Death Spiral. It is a double IPA that has local honey in it. So we work with actually, because he's the czar of local ingredient procurement. I'll let Chris tell us a little bit about the local honey.
So this comes from our friend named Ben Crawley. So the honey that he gathers is actually in hives all over town. He has some in Cameron Village. He has some right across the street from our brewery. So he's constantly building these hives, maintaining these hives, and we work with them every year to to get the ingredient for the special beer. We want to really create this flavor of place. So what better way to do that with honey that's gathered from across the street from the brewery? So his company is called Mr. Buzz. It is a beekeeper. He's a beekeeper. He's also a local restaurant guy. but he actually really cares about what he's doing, and he shows pride in everything that he does. And we've worked with him to get his honey for this batch of beer pretty much every time we've brewed it in the last 3 years. Each batch has 60 pounds of local honey in it. So that's him going out to the hives, cutting the hives, melting the hive, like filtering the honey, just to get some of the particulate out of there. And then we dump that into the beer during the boiling process. So it really adds to the flavor and the body of this beer, and really what makes it special. It's important for us to spend the money to support somebody local like that, to get the best quality in this beer. And also he's a cool guy, so we want to support that.
So this beer's it's kind of fun to kind of revisit this because it's kind of different from a lot of IPAs and double IPAs that you see these days. You see this, you can see my hand through this beer, which means it's not built to be hazy, which is kind of fun. This beer was originally designed before the haze craze had absolutely taken over IPAs. So it definitely has a little bit more of, forgive the term, but a little bit more of a kind of an old school IPA design to it. It also has a higher IBU count. IBUs, International Bittering Units, reflect the amount of theoretical bitterness that hops contribute to this beer. That having been said, the beer is actually hopped and it's dry hopped with Galaxy and Mosaic, which are two relatively new, modern era hops. So it has kind of a foot in the new world and a foot in the old world in terms of modern American craft beer IPAs. So kind of fun. Honey, back to kind of some of Chris's points, honey is a little, sometimes can be a little tricky to brew with because honey has so much sugar that it invites the yeast to really eat its entire self. So you almost have to find honey that has a good amount of kind of natural impurities to it in order to get some of the honey flavor all the way through to the beer, which is one of the reasons that we really want to work with wildflower honey or buckwheat honey in some cases for other beers, because then you actually get flavor that's all the way through rather than clover honey or something like that will produce a honey that is delicious as honey, but frankly, if you put it in beer, you might as well just be throwing sugar into your beer, which is fine, great way to add alcohol, but it doesn't provide any other flavor to it. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
So anyway, fun beer. Hey, Chris, you want to lead us through the final tasting here?
Yeah, for sure. Sorry.
That's all right. This one also relies, you can see the color is a bit darker. And so one of the other old school elements of the design is that it actually has a good addition of honey malt to it. And honey malt, it's called honey malt, just coincidentally. It's a darker malt, reminiscent of caramel malts and things like that were more popular for IPAs, in the mid 2000s.
So as you're kind of holding this beer up, like Les is saying, it's got a darker color to it. You can actually see through it. So to me, as a beer drinker, I'm looking at that saying, there's not going to be a huge addition of oats to this beer. I know that this beer is meant to be drank clear, and if there's carbonation level is going to be high on it, and I'm ready to sip it because it's totally different than the 3 beers that we've drank already at this point. So the next step, I'd smell it. To me, on the nose, I smell honey, and part of that's from the malt characteristic, but a lot of that is actually coming from the huge amount of honey that we use in that beer. I jumped a step, sorry. We forgot to swirl, so go back. Swirl it first, releasing all those aromas and all those oils from the hops. You're getting a lot of that scent coming out of there. Now you're sniffing it. Put your nose in there, give it a good hound sniff. You're getting that all over the back of your nostrils and into the back of your throat. And now you want to sip it.
Cheers.
Mm-hmm. Cheers. To me, this is a cleaner kind of thing, kind of beer. To me, it's just, you get a malt sweetness across your palate, and then it's got a hop bite to it. Much different than Cloud Surfer and Aloha right before it. This is a style of beer that's more traditional. Our little tweak on it is using these unusual hops. So between using Galaxy and Mosaic hops, you really get a different kind of character lean to it. So it's a West Coast, older school style type of beer with a trophy lean to it.
Gotcha. We had a question come in about 20 minutes ago on what are the different IPA styles and what are their defining characteristics based on, region, New England versus West Coast. I thought that was an interesting question.
Yeah, for sure. Les, you want to hit it?
Yeah, sure. Go for it, Woody. Why don't you take that one?
I think you'd be great to answer it, but I think, we as a company take our own twist, like Chris said, but the New England IPA is hazy, juicy, is sort of the desirable character to the point that people think it should be, milky, hazy, and that's not always our lean. We'll do one here and there that gets really, really into that. But what we like about Cloud Surfer is that it's got a bit of haze to it. It's sort of an homage to a New England IPA, but it's still refreshing, and you want to go back to it, and it doesn't wear down your palate like a lot of New Englands can. The sort of old school West Coast style is just bitter, and there's clarity to it. And I think I've found myself really coming back to that more and more recently. I find myself getting a little worn out by hazy IPAs. I love them, but I like having one, and then go into something that has a little more bitterness to it. What other styles of IPA?
Well, you know what? I'm going to jump off that point. So we brewed a old school, nice West Coast old IPA, which matches gravity units to bitterness units, which is an old recipe rule of thumb that brewers haven't really touched for a while. But we brewed that 2 days ago. So we've got like a classic West Coast coming out. And it's going to be a lot of fun. It's designed with 80 IBUs. This is funny. I haven't talked as much about IBUs in years. That should be compared to Surfer, for example, that has 40 calculated IBUs, but has way more hops in it, but they're added during fermentation, which don't contribute as much bitterness as they do flavor. So those are those juicy notes that Woody was talking about. Outside of that, you've got Imperial Ipas, which are simply IPAs that are both boosted in alcohol and in the amount of hops that are added in order to balance the alcohol. You've got other hoppy styles around the world, including Australian pale ales or something like that, which are these they're crystal colors, meaning they're easy to see through, but they've got a bunch of effervescence to them, and they lean on Australian and New Zealand hops, which can be fruity, but certainly feels different when you're sitting on top of a lot of carbonation. A cousin of that might be a Brewed IPA, which is an IPA that has a lot of hops in it, but by design, it is fermented down to 1 or 0 gravity, Plato, which means that it's approaching the density of water. So it's actually very dry, and kind of which effect has a different canvas upon which the hops sit. So a lot of different things going on in terms of IPAs out there right now.
We also, of course, lean really heavily on the session IPA.
Yeah.
Trophy Wife is, the thing we produce the most of. And we, our goal with that is to make it something drinkable, but that doesn't taste watery, doesn't taste like it's under 5%, provides still a full flavor, but something you want to come back to and something you can drink, a few of if you want to.
So we got a question in the chat, and I think it would be really great if we could briefly talk about it or just you guys' experience. But the question was, how will breweries pivot due to COVID-19 and its restrictions? Can you guys talk about how you guys have shifted and how you are taking steps to protect your employees and customers?
Yeah, for sure. I'll start off and Woody just jump in wherever. So what we did quickly was realize to lean towards our to-go options and really just update our website and make sure that we had all the options and make it as easy as possible for our guests and our fans to kind of still have access to our beer. When we first made that pivot, we decided that we were going to go zero contact as soon as possible. So what we did is stopped accepting cash. We made everybody go to the website so there'd be no interaction really between our employees and our guests. So people can go online, order on our website, and then they can show up to any of our locations and pick up their product. And what our employees will do, they'll prepare your order, leave it aside in storage, and then when you arrive, they'll come grab your name from anywhere from 6 feet to 10 feet away from you. Grab your name, go inside, retrieve your order, and then bring it out to your vehicle. Bring it out to a table near your vehicle, leave it there, say thank you, leave, and then you can come out of your vehicle, grab it, and get in your car and take off. Our goal is to keep everybody as safe as possible while still being able to provide people with beer that they want and some people need right now.
Yeah. Thank you for answering that question. Well, something that I got actually earlier this week, most people are used to ordering online and picking up your food, but are we, like, let's say I just want to order a 4-pack. Is that the best way for me to order that, is online and come and pick it up that way?
Same way. You want to order a 4-pack, you want to order a case of beer or anything. And all of our locations are selling our beer, selling our wine list. And then we have food at State of Beer and then Trophy on Morgan Street. Go to the website. We are updating our Instagram and Facebook all the time. And the website's constantly updated so you know what we have. And on Instagram, you can always see what's coming. Pretty much every Friday, we're in a good rotation of releasing a new beer and kind of spreading the word throughout the week, letting people know it's going to be available. And then we are releasing those beers on Friday. We've got a lot of cool stuff in the next few weeks that are coming out of our fooders, which are the wooden vessels that you see behind me, which are going to be coming out in pretty cool packages. Some are going to be in bottles, some are going to be back in 12-ounce cans. All of them are meant to celebrate, we call it the blooming of the beer when it's ready to actually be shared. And a way for people to kind of stay in touch and stay in contact with our brewery and what we're doing.
Yeah. We briefly talked about food at State of Beer and the Morgan Street location. I would love to hear from each of you guys what's your favorite menu item. Personally, I love the Most Loyal pizza. That is my favorite. It changed my world when I had it. I also love the tater tot. So like, I'm hooked on your food, but I would love to hear what you guys love about your food or your favorite menu item.
Who wants to start?
Right now, I'm sorry. What did you say, Chris? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. You start.
Oh, I was going to slide in and compliment the kitchen on the addition of arancini to the small plates menu over at Morgan Street. It is amazing, especially with the sauce that they've created. It's just like something I find myself craving lately. So that's it's a risotto. It's a fried risotto ball with this kind of tomato-based. You guys can probably do a better job of describing it. Sauce that comes with it. It's fantastic.
You're making me hungry now.
Yeah. Woody, how about you?
Oh man, my wife and I go through the pizza list for sure. Sometimes we create our own, but the actual the menu item, we do the Most Loyal all the time. The Best Dressed once in a while. Those are sort of the most popular ones in general over there. We'll do the local celebrity a lot too. Over at State of Beer, we're always changing things too, but the sandwich menu, what do I usually hit the Miss Maggie, which just came back. The Italian salad, Chris and I both get that a lot for lunch.
Weekly.
It's a big salad. It's a meal for lunch. It's makes us feel a little bit better about what I'm going to eat for dinner. So I hit that one a lot.
Yeah.
That salad.
Most Loyal is my favorite thing at Trophy over here on Morgan Street. It's one of the things that it's tried and true. It's always delicious, and it's one thing I always come back to. But I'm really excited about how much work these guys are doing in the kitchen to provide more things like coming from the farmer's market on a regular basis. They're so good at seasonality. They're always going to the farmer's market, getting these items like tomatoes, and as they're coming into season, peaches, blueberries, strawberries, and really jumping on them and being creative with them. If you haven't had Brian's cheesecakes, I feel sorry for you. I think it's a real problem. I think they come up with some
No problem.
crazy ideas for cheesecakes. It's like, I mean, they're always like the thing that you never knew you needed. How about that? You're like, man, what is that? A peanut butter fudge banana cheesecake? Yes, I will have that. Yeah.
Yeah, real quick.
Now.
Real quick, the most loyal was actually our chef's attempt to pay an homage to an original sandwich we had at the Busy Bee, which was a local chicken breast Neomond bun. We had a basil aioli on there, and then chicken breast was topped with honey once it was done cooking. So the pizza is a sort of a basil pesto base, and then that, roasted chicken. We topped that pizza with honey. So he was trying to recreate that sandwich that we had for so many years over here at the Busy Bee and Trophy Tap Table.
Just got a comment. Brian's Cheesecakes, the best in Raleigh. So we'll keep that in mind. Definitely want to go try that if you haven't before. While we're also on the subject of farmers market, someone asked, is the blueberry beer done for this year yet? Or when can we expect it?
All right. So we have, yes. So
Blueberry Loner is done.
Pardon?
Blueberry Loner is done for this year, but we've got a couple.
Blueberry Loner's done, yes.
Yeah. So our farmers market Berliner Weiss, we call them loners because it's meant to be served on its own. Where it's traditional Berliner Weiss were served with a syrup on the side, and you would add that to your beer along the way as you're drinking it. But we have a new blueberry beer, which is in process as we speak. Les was just putting final touches on a label today. So this one is really exciting. It's blueberries, North Carolina blueberries with a little bit of citrus zest added to it to kind of like brighten up those blueberry notes. And this one, it was actually conditioned on a golden sour base. And all of our golden sour beers are aged in Sauvignon Blanc barrels, which really present a little bit more of a higher acidity in the beer. And we like that because it's not oaky and buttery like a lot of other white wine barrels can be. And we're really excited about this because it's going to be 500 milliliter bottles coming out in the next month or so.
And then behind that, we have a foeder aged beer that's resting on some North Carolina blueberries as well. And that'll go into cans once it's ready. So a couple more blueberries for you.
Couple more blueberries. And then we got some strawberry beers coming out next. So still have some of those that are going to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, awesome. Any last comments on the beers from you guys? Anything that people just have to know about, the best way to drink a beer, maybe even what's a good meal to pair with one of the beers that we've covered today? I think people would love to hear, especially that pairing suggestion if you guys have one.
Yeah, but before I'll jump into that, but I do want to, Bill did ask, and I'll answer this.
I was not ignoring Bill. We were going to come to it eventually.
Exactly. I just wanted to, we got you. The question was about the cloud surfers presence at Carter Finley. And it was amazing to be in Carter Finley last year. Alas, we do not know what the future holds. We have not been told hide nor hair of what the possibility of football being on the field, much less what beer is going to be in the stand. So I'm sorry I don't have an answer for you on that. But thank you so much for supporting us. It was such an honor to have Cloud Surfer in Carter Finley. That was a lot of fun for us. But I think take Aloha Surfer and do anything with just a little bit of pineapple, whether it's tacos with pineapple or a pineapple glazed ham or something like that. I think that would be super fun. I like that kind of direct play when you're talking about beer pairings. Sometimes that can be a little tricky, but that would be a suggestion for me.
One little footnote is typically hops work really well with spices. So if you're going to have a double death spiral, pair that with our Daredevil pizza. That combination is delicious to me. Our Daredevil pizza has sriracha. It has caramelized onions. It has jalapenos. It has all these things that add a little bit of, it adds a spice to it that pairs great with a super cold double death spiral.
Awesome.
Yeah, the only bit of advice I would give is actually for husband, which is not the beer I go to the most by itself. You know, I might lean towards Surfer or Wife or even Mort's more often by themselves, but husband is really versatile with, you know, most things in the kitchen. Anything that's not way overpowering or way spicy, you know, it almost has, you know, those whip beer refreshing characteristics, and why I love them more than, say, a Hefeweizen, or, you know, there's not overwhelming banana and clove in it. It's still really got a little bit of acidity and fun notes to play off of all kinds of dishes. So that's a fun one to play around with.
Would any of the 4 beers that we had today pair well with dessert, or is there another beer that you guys think pairs well with some type of dessert out there?
Aloha Server would be great for dessert. You know, it's got a lot of that sweet pineapple note, the tartness of the passion fruit. If you're a cheesecake or key lime pie person like I am, I mean, that's a way to go. That pairing is great.
Yeah.
Give a little inside info that a batch of Slingshot might be coming up. That's our coffee porter with our friends from Slingshot. Working on putting that in cans again, so that'll be a fun one with dessert coming up.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to pair these kind of darker, a little bit sweeter beers with things like chocolate or ice cream. In addition to Slingshot, we also have a beer in the works, the Black is Beautiful collaboration project that a lot of breweries are involved in. We have brewed one of those that will be released in the next 2 weeks. And that will be a great beer for beside brownies or beside vanilla ice cream, or kind of really a lot of kind of good dessert options there.
Chocolate chip cookie, something as simple as a chocolate chip cookie or something like that. It's so good.
Yeah, those loners that Chris was talking about are also really good beside cobbler, like fruit cobblers. I would say that's really fun addition, because sometimes that little bit of tartness that comes with the Berliner Weiss with the fruit will cut into some of that heavy sweetness from something like that.
Awesome. Well, I think it's time to go ahead and wrap up the tour and tasting. It's clear that you guys are passionate about what you do, and that's amazing. And we just thank you for sharing your knowledge with us and sharing some fun stories about your business. You know, everybody in Raleigh loves Trophy and says great things about it. And so when I moved here a year and a half ago, I had to come and try you guys out, and I've never been disappointed. So again, I want to say thank you again for your time today and leading us through this tasting and just sharing your expertise on this. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, David. And thanks for putting this thing together. And big thanks to the Downtown Raleigh Alliance for, you know, working with small businesses like us to kind of keep us in front of people and sharing our story.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. This is what we love doing. And while we're on the subject of small businesses, if anyone is looking to support our businesses downtown, you can go to our website, and we have a list of who's open, who's taking online orders, to-go orders, dining in, all of that. We also have some other resources there on how you can support downtown businesses while you stay safe. So yeah, please continue to stay connected with us. If you're not already on our subscription list, go to our website and subscribe. Follow us on social media. We are constantly putting out updates and trying to keep people informed on how you can still visit downtown or get around in the safest way possible. And before we log off, I do want to say thank you to our Discover Downtown sponsors who help us, you know, continue this program each month, and we are really thankful for that. So again, thank you for tuning in tonight. Thank you to our friends at Trophy Brewing and the whole team, especially the folks that put together that awesome video. And, you know, the folks behind the scenes that are working in your restaurants and breweries and, you know, just still keeping our community going. Thank you to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.